10th, 2024. This is episode 37 of the In a Nutshell podcast. I am your host, Sean Vowells, and as usual, I am joined by Joe Meade. Today, Joe and I will go over some coaching changes in football, mostly with the coordinators. Then we'll hit the Big Ten basketball game that most recently happened since our last recording, and then preview the pretty epic day in college hoops, which is later this afternoon. We're recording Saturday morning. So, Joe, we talked about Wink Martindale going to Michigan. Didn't become official until after, but anything else to add on Wink that we didn't hit on last time? Because we did get a video out. The clip is doing pretty well, but good news for Michigan fans.
Yeah, Sean, I think it's just good it's official. We previewed what he'd do schematically. Check out the video on either New York Giants Kingdom or Sports Daily CFB trying to grow that. But, Sean, I think the bad news associated with this, and I'm certainly not going to try to blame Wink Martindale. He's probably on campus for less than 12 hours when this decision was probably made. Michigan's secondary coach, Steve Clinkscale, we touched on it a little on Wednesday. He is going to the Chargers as of 10 a.m. this morning, which is not great news. He helped recruit Will Johnson, was essential in turning around the 2021 defense because 2020 secondary of Michigan was probably one of the worst in Power 5. So not great news for Michigan, but it did come after probably the best news they've had coordinator-wise this entire offseason. So I think you take the good with the bad if you're a Michigan fan. I think it's slightly concerning that they hired Sharon mainly for stability, not only for players, but for coaching staff. And really, the only guys you have coming back are Steve Kasula, who was at UMass with Don Brown this year, Kirk Campbell, who a lot of people criticize his play calling against East Carolina. I think it was balanced, but it didn't necessarily mean it was great. And other than that, Sean, they haven't really retained much of their position coaches. You know, Clinkscale gone, Elston gone. Clinkscale, Elston, Jesse Minter, and Jay Harbaugh, but that was kind of gonna always happen when Jim jumped ship. So I think Michigan still has a really good defense coming back. I think Wink, with better personnel, is going to do a great job, as we said. And Sean, this was not the only coordinator move, though, in the past 48 hours.
But first, Joe, I forgot to tell you something before. Mm-hmm. Another piece of Michigan news. Athletic Director Ward Manuel was named the chair of the College Football Playoff Committee for next year. Now, I think it's at least 8 to 10 people on this committee, and there is an athletic director from every conference on the committee. Michigan gets the one from the Big Ten, who also will chair the committee. Any thoughts on that?
I think I will try to make sure this is not my opinion. I think a lot of Michigan fans joke. I would say 70% of the Michigan fan base is fed up with Warren Manuel as the athletic director. Michigan is one of the top athletic programs around the board in the country, so it sounds ridiculous that to an outsider why Michigan fans have been critical of him. It's really been his reactive, not proactive approach to everything, not only the coaching searches, which we've talked about the 4 major coaches that have left in the past 5 years. It's also been to NIL and just about anything else. And even the Sidegate investigation, it was really Santa Ono, the president of the university, stepping up publicly for Jim Harbaugh. Ward only had one strong statement, and one could argue he didn't even write that. It was probably someone on his compliance or his PR team. But getting off of that, Sean, I don't know what ultimately this does. Lloyd Carr was temporarily on the committee in 2017 before his health started to decline. So, and Lloyd Carr, by the way, would not have done any favors for Jim Harbaugh. We could save that episode for the offseason. With that said, I don't think it does much for Michigan. It's pretty clear that I'll be ultimately very upfront. If Michigan was one of the last teams out, and there was a team that probably deserved to be in over them that didn't bring in the revenue share Michigan did, I think the committee would pick Michigan, whether Ward was on the committee or not. So I think it's just news. I don't know what that does to his stability at Michigan. There's rumors that the regents are discussing a contract extension. I think they probably picked the absolute worst time for that. So, yeah, a lot to unpack there, but I ultimately think it's close to a nothing burger. What do you say, Sean?
Yeah, for those who don't know, in both the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee for basketball and now this College Football Playoff Committee, when your team is talked about, you have to leave the room, and you cannot vote on, like, say, for this year, the committee was voting on Florida State or Alabama for the fourth spot, and they have 11 members. I'm not sure they do. Something around there. If one of the ADs from those schools is in the committee, they cannot participate in the vote for that fourth spot. So, if Michigan is in a situation where they are up for the 12th spot or the 8th spot or whatever, Ward Manuel cannot participate in the vote over another team. So they do that, I think, for, to make being on the committee mean less. It's a different group of people every year, and I don't think it means much, but it is, I think, at least a little bit interesting to see him chair the entire thing after what was, obviously a great year winning the national title, but you lose your head coach, and we don't have to go into the issues with the basketball program, which we've done quite a few times. But Joe, we'll go back to coordinators for a second. It ends up that the rumors are true. Bill O'Brien will not be the offensive coordinator at Ohio State. He takes the head job at Boston College after Boston College's coach became the defensive coordinator for the Green Bay Packers. So while this position was filled shortly after Bill O'Brien left, what are your thoughts on this one, as the Buckeyes will not see a Bill O'Brien offense?
I think it's pretty remarkable that within 24 hours of him leaving, they also hired Chip Kelly, another ex-NFL head coach and offensive mastermind. And just for those of you who don't know, Ryan Day's, one of his biggest coaching mentors besides Urban Meyer, is Chip Kelly. He worked under him with the Eagles, the 49ers, before he took that offensive coordinator position at Ohio State. And sure, we could criticize Chip Kelly all you want as an NFL coach. Certainly a stint at UCLA. I think he gets a little too much flack based on what they have to deal with there, and really look at their home crowds. No one cares unless they play USC. So I think he did a pretty good job there, but the past month we kind of indicated when we talked about the Jeff Hafley news that he was always looking for a way out. And they tried to fire him in November, but then they didn't want to pay the buyout. Then January comes right here, the rumblings, he's interviewing for NFL offensive coordinator jobs. And Sean, this is probably the first time a head coach willingly, without getting fired, I should say, took a coordinator position at a school in their same conference instead of being a head coach. And UCLA, I understand it might not be a top 10, maybe not even a top 15, one could argue not top 20 job. It's a pretty good job. You're in LA. You're in the Big Ten now, and even if the Pac-12 still existed, you were in the Pac-12. And for him to go to Ohio State, I just want to kind of meme on UCLA real quick. You would have been better off paying out the buyout in November if you really wanted him fired, and I'm sure they did. If you're leaking stuff to the press in such a manner, and then you don't pull the trigger, you would have been better off. You would have had a full-fledged coaching search. Now, probably the top candidates, they're already gone. I mean, they could have swung and missed at Jonathan Smith. Now that's completely off the table. Ryan Grubb's going to the Seattle Seahawks as an offensive coordinator. This coaching search we'll touch on a little if we have time next episode, but that's a really interesting predicament they're in, because if you had a guy who's been successful, relatively successful everywhere he's been except probably the 49ers, and he leaves UCLA to be an offensive coordinator, and he still has to recruit. He's not going to Ohio State to not recruit. Maybe he'll have a little step back, limited reward recruiting. He's going to have to recruit. So this is just a bad look for UCLA. I think for Ohio State, the worry is that, he doesn't develop quarterbacks well. I don't think that's going to have to be a concern with the loaded offense they have. They could be a run-heavy offense. They could be a spread offense, or they could do what he's traditionally done at Oregon. And even at UCLA, he relied on a lot of the defense the past couple of years. With Ohio State's defense and the offensive talent they have, I struggle to see how he could do a bad job.
Yeah, the timing of this all cannot be understated. UCLA is not going to really have a full swing at the portal like most coaches would in year one because those players have already committed elsewhere. And, going into a new conference, the buyout may have been worth it. I don't know how much it is, but it may have been worth it to give the new coach a clean slate. It's almost like he's coming in, I guess before spring is good, but he is not going to have the roster that he wants, whoever becomes the head coach. And obviously going into a new conference, it could be tough for the Bruins next year. And Joe, not only is he, leaving a head coach to be a coordinator, he's also taken rumors are upwards of a $4 million pay cut, which shows how much he really does want to get out of LA. Obviously, with the taxes and the cost of living, it probably isn't quite $4 million less, but still, not sure where Chip Kelly's career goes from here. I mean, he's had his shot at the NFL. He's had his shot as a big-time college coach, and with mixed results. You think, is he just going to be a play caller for an elite program and a coordinator the rest of the way, or does he have, head coaching aspirations again? He's in his 60s, if I'm not mistaken, so not sure what's next with Chip Kelly. But, Joe, anything to add here? And if not, we'll move it over to Hoops.
Yeah, Sean, just shocking. And with him and Halfley and Grubb going from Bama to the Seahawks, I think that's less of a rip. It's getting interesting. I think a lot of people this offseason, the college football worshipers, the sport of college football is under a lot of scrutiny right now. And, I'm not trying to be all dark and gloomy. I think the sport's as popular as ever. There's a lot of things that are probably going to get addressed and frankly need to be addressed, but we'll end it there.
So, Joe, just one basketball game happened since we last talked, and it was one that I think kind of went as we would have expected considering the play of the recent teams, and that was Penn State winning at home at the Bryce Jordan Center against Iowa, 89-79. The game was, Iowa State led by 8 at halftime and then won by 2 in the second half. Balanced attack here for the Nittany Lions, 4 players in double figures. Kanye Clary comes back after a lengthy spell on the bench with 18 minutes. And Peyton Sanford just 3 for 9 from the field, and Penn State gets the job done. Just anything to add here other than 2 teams that are going to be in the middle of the pack?
Well, that's actually my next point, Sean. We predicted Penn State they might be our Wednesday team. At 6-6, there's a 1-game difference, and we still got 8 to go. Iowa, the way they played, reminded me of a last-place team, and certainly they're not that. They're in 11th with all the tiebreakers and what have you. If they continue to play that disgustingly bad on the road, they're going to have problems. They play at Maryland. Next Wednesday. You do have Minnesota before then. And again, that's not even a guarantee, the way Minnesota's looked of late. So I think Iowa, to get out of Wednesday and to even get close to the tournament, you would know this better than me, they got to pick it up real quick.
Yeah, I think we talked about the 6 teams from the Big Ten that are situated pretty well at this point. And maybe there was room for one other team, like an Iowa, Maryland, Indiana type, but neither of those teams are really taking that right now. And, there's not a ton of needle-moving wins in the conference like there usually is, and those teams are really good, so you can't be just relying on them to come to town to beat them. But I think more so that Iowa is just not really put in a position to win basketball games this year. They score it really well, but it seems like they have to have almost a really, really good day offensively just to have a chance to win. And Penn State has really been playing well recently. They beat Indiana on the road. They beat Rutgers on the road, which is a place that is tough too. They won both those games by 15. They win this one. Their schedule does get pretty tough upcoming, but I did think that Penn State would have a better season than people were suggesting. Obviously, their roster is not probably as good as they want it, but they're finding a way to win more games, at least up to this point, than we thought. They have 6 wins And there's 8 games left. There's a real good chance that they can get to 9 or 10. And that's a really good first year for Mike Rhodes.
Yeah, I think anything that avoids Wednesday for them, and even if they're at 11th, they've already superseded my expectations. So really good on them. I don't think Mike Rhodes is quite coach of the year material yet, but hey, seriously, if they get to 9 or 10 wins in this conference, Sean, he'd have a solid argument.
Especially with Clary missing a bunch of games. But, Joe, we'll move over to the predictions for today's game. A little shorter episode for everybody today, but we've got 5 games today. We're going to start off in New Jersey, Wisconsin on the road at Rutgers, 12 noon Eastern on the Big Ten Network. Wisconsin is currently listed as 3.5% favorites. Joe, don't need a prediction here, just kind of talk about it, but what can Wisconsin do to stop their 3-game losing streak?
I think the spells where they just get clobbered on 10-0 or 8-1 or some stupid run like that against Rutgers' offense, against Michigan's offense, you could make an argument that's semi-acceptable considering Michigan has some firepower. Rutgers has very little firepower. What they did to Michigan last Saturday, I think should be a crime against humanity. It should be brought in front of the international tribunal for how Michigan blew that game. But regardless, I don't think Rutgers could do that twice in a week, even at home. I think it's a mental thing at this stage for Wisconsin, right? They're a really good team. For most of this conference season, you could argue they were the best team. I'm not saying they were. You could argue it, though, and you'd have a pretty good case. So they have to get more scoring out of the bench, and they can't have guys just jacking up threes. Just attack the hole. That was working perfectly. If they attack the rim, get in the paint, I don't see how they don't win this game. I think it'll be a very ugly game no matter what the result is, but hard to see this being a blowout. So I think Wisconsin could probably get a squeak away with this late. I think it'll be back and forth, but then Wisconsin last 10 minutes takes over and gets back on the winning side of things.
Yeah, Rutgers is coming off back-to-back road wins, Joe, so their crowd might be a little amped up for this one. They beat Maryland on the road, which is not an easy thing to do, regardless of, how good the Terrapins are, but I think as long as Wisconsin doesn't shoot themselves in the foot here, I think they'll get the job done. And that's easier said than done. Plenty of teams have done so at Rutgers this year. Purdue even had to, kind of hold on late. That game certainly was not over. They won't get blown out, and I think if Rutgers, if it's another close game down the stretch, Joe, and Wisconsin's like, well, if these couple possessions don't go our way, we're going to be 0-4 in our last 4 games. I think that Rutgers could. I think it will be real close down at the end, and I think in a couple possessions sample size, you like to pick A.J. Storr and Tyler Wall to get the job done, but I'm worried for Wisconsin in this game. This is not the game you want needing a win. You've got to be able to play free against Rutgers, and you've got to be able to play with confidence, because if you don't, you're not going to score. This team is second in Division I in defensive efficiency, and they are 300th in offense, or no, that's not. That's a little bit it's a little bit of an exaggeration. They're 297th in offense. So this game will be close either way.
Sean, real quick, if you're a Wisconsin fan, do you hit the panic button if you lose this game?
Yeah. I mean, just a week and a half ago, Joe, we were talking about Wisconsin being in good shape to at least get a share of this title. You play a team that's 2 teams in a row here that are probably playing on Wednesday. I know it's a tough place to play. If you want to be a top 4 protected seed, you've got to win these next 2 games. But after that, things could get. It's got to stop somewhere, right? Stop it here. Then Ohio State. You're hosting Ohio State. You'll beat them comfortably if you beat Rutgers today. It's time to get back on track. They're 16-7 all of a sudden. They were a 2 seed. Maybe even pushing the 1 line a couple weeks ago, but got to stop it here. Next game, Joe, 2 o'clock on CBS. Probably the biggest game of the day in the Big Ten. We've got number 10 Illinois going on the road to the Breslin Center to play Michigan State. The Spartans have opened as 3.5-point favorites. desperate spot for the Spartans. They might need this one to have to not be sweating on Selection Sunday. They're dangerously close to the bubble right now, and Illinois just trying to, I guess, hang on to that second spot.
Sean, you do a masterful job of bracketology. I just want to alert people to this. As of yesterday, Sean put MSU as one of the last 11 seeds that doesn't have to play in Dayton. That's not great. And I think they have, two quad wins all year? Quad one wins all year, Sean? I think they're 2-9 in their quad one games. Is that...
They have, what's the other one after Baylor?
Maryland.
Maryland? On the road? Yeah, that would probably be quad one. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, 2-7 or really 4-9 in quad one and two games. So 2-7 in quad one, 2-2 in quad two, according to B-Ball.net, which does a job of it. Regardless, Sean, these opportunities are running out to get these really good wins at home in front of a charged up crowd. I really, MSU has to win this game, Sean. And it's not they have to win this to make the tournament. I think that's extremely dramatic for no reason. But, I mean, if you're looking at their schedule coming up, and I'm not saying it's hard, it's actually, that's probably the problem of it. It's at Penn State, at Michigan. Those are two games, if you're an MSU fan, you probably have to win, or you expect to win. But as you've seen with Penn State, and even in these rivalry games against Michigan, anything could happen. And then they have Iowa, Ohio State at home. Those aren't going to move the needle at all. I think their last chance to get a really good win, Sean, is probably at Purdue and at Indiana in the month of March. So they probably have 3 chances left in this regular season to get really good wins, and this is one of them, and this is the only one you have left at home. So cannot understate the importance of it. I do think it's going to come down to Tyson needs help. I think Jaden Akins, he's been a lot better of late. I think he'll probably chip in more than 10. It's going to be down to A.J. Hoggard finding it, and Malik Hall. If he hits threes, I have a hard time believing the Spartans lose this. But those are two things that have been anything but guaranteed all year. What do you say, Sean?
Yeah, margin for error is very thin if they drop this game. And if you think about it, and Illinois plays really without a 5, you don't have to play a 5 if you're Michigan State. You can play Cohen, Carr, and Malik Hall, and Jaden Akins, Hoggard, and Walker. You can throw that lineup out there. So I think if Izzo goes to that more times than not, I think the matchup will be in their favor. If Sissoko and Cooper and Kohler, I mean, like, what are they going to do on the defensive end? Who are they going to guard? I mean, Danjo will play 5-6 minutes for Illinois, but when he's not on the floor, you put him on Ty Rodgers? Like, I think Izzo will try and get away from that as much as he can. So don't expect to see much of Xavier Booker today, Spartan fans, unless, the game is over at halftime or something like that. But, Joe, you mentioned the next 4 games for them. If they drop this one, it almost becomes they have to win all of those. And then you don't want to have to go into Purdue having to win, because no one would blame you for losing. And you play Northwestern and Indiana on their senior night. So margin for error is thin for Michigan State. Being Michigan State, if they are near the bubble, they'll probably get thrown in the first 4 as a big brand name. Get people to, not that they need people to watch that. Those 16 seed games get pretty great ratings, but we've seen big names get thrown there before, like Michigan, like Indiana. So UCLA, when they went all the way to the Final Four.
Final Four. Yeah. We don't need to be reminded of how they got to the Final Four. Yeah, especially in this state.
Shouldn't have even been in the tournament that year, but that was the first year I did bracketology, and I just cannot get around how they got in. But we'll move on to the next game, Joe, 4 o'clock on FS1. Maryland on the road to Ohio State. The Buckeyes are favored by 2.5. Both teams coming in off of a bunch of losses. Maryland has lost 2 in a row, and Ohio State, everyone knows how much they've been struggling. So at this point, Joe, who's going to stop the bleeding?
I think Ohio State's going to have to stop the bleeding. I think Maryland has been historically bad on the road, and I understand Ohio State has been historically bad in 2024. But I do think the amount of scoring they'll have with the home crowd, and I don't think it'll even be that amped up of a home crowd, will be sufficient enough to carry them to a victory. Gonna need Thornton to have a really good game. I think Jamison battles. I don't think he's gone off necessarily, but I think he could probably just stay within the 12 to 15 point range. And considering Thornton going for a good near 20 and Jameson battleship again, and then having enough firepower from Roddy Gale and Zed Key and Akpara not doing anything stupid, they should win this game. What do you say, Sean?
It's a matchup we could see Wednesday, the Big Ten tournament, and I think that says more about how bad the teams are than anything. I mean, Jameer Young could have a huge game. Maryland does have 3 road wins on the year. At Illinois is one of them, and they won at UCLA, who they're having a tough year, and then they won at Iowa. So it's not totally out of the question that they get the job done here, but you have to get something from your role players to win on the road. I don't see it either. 6:30 BTN, Joe, Michigan going on the road to Nebraska. Big win for the Wolverines last time. Anything they can build upon, or does Nebraska need to get back to their winning ways on their own home court? Well, it would
take Nebraska a very poor Nebraska shooting performance from Tominaga from guys like Tominaga and Hoiberg to lose this game. I don't see how Nebraska has done so well at home the entire year, especially their last home game. They beat Wisconsin, to losing to an 8-15 team. I don't care if it's Michigan or if this was Minnesota of last year. I don't see it happening. Nebraska's favored by 10.5, Sean. I would have never thought I'd live to see the day where Michigan basketball would be a 10.5 point underdog to Nebraska anywhere. I don't care if they're playing on a farm in Iowa, anywhere. That to me is shocking. And I think that speaks volumes. It's not even a knock on Michigan. It's more of a praise to Nebraska where they've come the past 2 years. So I think Nebraska wins pretty comfortably. I think this game, per usual, will be close at halftime. I think this might be one of the few conference games. Sean, Michigan's led in 10 of their 12 conference games at the half. I think this will be the third time they don't lead at halftime. I think it'll be pretty close in the first half, but Nebraska just has too much firepower for Michigan to deal with. And with no Doug on the road, I mean, come on. How else is Michigan going to win this game?
Yeah, Nebraska is, Joe, 14-1 at home this year. That loss was to Creighton. And then 1-7 on the road. That was at Kansas State. They are 6-7 in the Big Ten, 6-0 at home, and 0-7 on the road. So you're not winning road games. You got to win your home games. And if Nebraska does drop this one somehow, still no Doug McDaniel, remember, they're going to be dangerously close to the bubble. Michigan is not as bad of a number from a numbers point of view as their record suggests. They're still above, Indiana and Penn State and Minnesota, I think, in Ken Palm last time I checked. But with no Doug McDaniel, you got to win this ball game. When does that end, by the way? It seems like it's got to be soon, right, for Doug?
Yeah, it's 6 road games, but rumor is that could be extended. So,
oh man.
So again, this is another chance for me to take a shot at Warren Manuel. I mean, come on, what kind of suspension is that? It's either like clear or it's like 6 games. You can't tell me, oh, it's 6, but no, it's not 6, but it's like some third world country.
Yeah.
Michigan's athletic department with their punishments.
Yeah. So Doug McDaniel, we know this is game 5, I think, so he will miss Michigan's next road game against Illinois. And then they have 2-3 road games after that. So maybe he'll be back, maybe he won't. Just have to find out. The nightcap, Joe, on Fox Primetime Hoops. Indiana goes to Mackey Arena to play Purdue. 8 o'clock on Fox. Purdue as 17.5 point favorites at this point. Any chance that this game is even in doubt come 12 minutes left in the second half?
Maybe 8 minutes, but no, I struggle to see how this will be a competitive game, Sean, especially after what Purdue did to Indiana at Assembly Hall. I think this will be a bloodthirsty crowd. It's not out of desperation. It's probably more out of anger that they've... What was the last time? So Purdue beat them, lost to them last year at home. Then the year before... No, they beat... So, yeah, they haven't seen a win at home in 2 years, which for Purdue fans is unacceptable. They want to see them beat Indiana at Mackey every year. So I think this is probably going to be one of the more electric crowds we see the whole month of February. So because of the rivalry, even if the teams are both bad, that's always a charged up crowd. But yeah, Sean, I don't really care who goes off besides Edie. It could be really anyone. Maybe if it's two guys, this game could get ugly by halftime. But if it's one, I still think Purdue runs away with it, probably by 15.
Yeah, Ware is banged up for Indiana. He's actually questionable if he doesn't play. I mean,
Oh God.
he did a fairly good job against Edie last time. I know Edie had 35, but he got a lot of whistles. He was like 12 for 28 from the field or something. That length bothered him while he was out there. And, the foul trouble is going to happen. Maybe Mackenzie Mbako can create a matchup issue for Purdue. Lawyer can't probably cover him, but Mbako got auto benched for 2 fouls 3 minutes into the game last time. So I am with you, Joe. I struggle to see this being a close game at all. And I know it's a rivalry game, but one of these teams is elite and one of these teams is okay. So, what is going to happen for this game to be close? Foul trouble for Edie. 30, 25 points by 3 players for IU. I mean,
Yeah, it's like the Doctor Strange at the end of Infinity War, where he goes 1 in 14 million. I don't think it's that desperate, but I'm sorry, Sean. I don't see any avenue of victory for Indiana tonight.
yeah, the way that you beat Purdue last year was to pressure their guards, and they've done an okay job at that this year. You've got to make a lot of shots and hope that Purdue don't, and that's just not a sustainable strategy. That's why they're going to win this league by multiple games. But Gus Johnson is on the call for tonight, so he's a really awesome commentator, both football and basketball. But Joe, that's all the games today. And I think that's it for our Saturday preview. We'll be back tomorrow on Sports Daily College Basketball. Joe may or may not be joining Mike and I. And then next In a Nutshell will be next week sometime. So what do you got, Joe?
Yeah, Sean, I think we could end on your bracketology.
Oh,
and
yeah,
then,
that's right.
Yeah, I just want to ask you a few questions. That was a popular segment last year. Now that we're in February, I think it's very fair to do those questions. But just to remind everyone, Sean has Purdue as the #1 overall seed. Is that correct?
Yes.
Illinois is the last #3 seed. Wisconsin's the first #4 seed, so just on the edge of being a protected seed for now. Then there's a huge drop-off after the first 3 teams. You got Northwestern as the first 9 seed, so probably teetering between the 8 and the 9. Nebraska is a 10 seed. And then Michigan State, as we mentioned earlier, one of the last protected 11 seeds that doesn't have to go to Dayton. I guess we touched on this for Michigan State. Nebraska, before our next episode, I think the worst thing they could do is just lose a dumb game at home, especially one to Michigan. Even though the loss isn't going to kill them, it's just something you don't need on your resume. And they've shown next to no ability to win on the road in this conference. So what is Nebraska going to have to do to just carry on?
They already have the big wins, right? So I think it's just volume of wins. It doesn't really matter who they play. Just got to get W's. You got to win at least one more game on the road. You cannot go 0-10 in the conference on the road. And I mean they're more than halfway there. I think they're 0-7. So the bank is a great place to play. You got to protect your home court and get one more win on the road, and then you'll be okay. I mean the big wins might carry them in anyway, but you do not want to leave one road win for the entire year against a team that's kind of struggling in the Big 12 to the committee's hands. Especially as Nebraska has not been a team that would be given the benefit of the doubt because they're not in the committee's minds every year.
Yeah. Similar question for Northwestern, Sean. They have 2 games upcoming that they're probably definitely going to be favored in, not necessarily easy. Penn State and at Rutgers. Is it concerning if they lose one of those 2 games?
Yes. Do the question again.
So they have Penn State at home and then at Rutgers. Will it be concerning for Northwestern if they lose one of those next 2 games?
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to lose to those teams. One of them might not kill you, but you, they're in a situation where they beat Purdue too, and um, I don't think they beat either of the other 3 teams there. But you have the loss to Chicago State. Don't want to be.
Well, they beat Illinois, Sean. That was the.
Oh, they beat Illinois. That's right. So they have 2 of the wins. They did lose then to Illinois on the road in overtime, right? After beating them earlier. Yeah. Okay. So they've got the big wins. They do have a quad 5 loss to Chicago State, if you want to categorize it as that. Just don't want to be on the bubble with that because those are games that really could keep you out. And we saw it happen with Michigan last year. As long as you're in the high 10, 9 range, you'll be okay. But if you fall to the 11 range, there's going to be a lot of reasons to keep you out.
Yeah, and Sean, I'm going to end with this one. Right now, we have 4 teams definitely safe. Probably could lose out and would still be in. Then we have... Oh, no, sorry. 3 teams that could definitely lose out and still be in. I'll be very clear on that. We have 1 semi-safe team, Northwestern, we just touched on. Then we have Nebraska, who's pretty close to the bubble, and then Michigan State squarely on the bubble. Your first 4 out include Ole Miss, St. John's, Colorado, and Richmond. Who would be the closest team not in that from the conference?
So I actually stopped after Colorado yesterday because there's just no other teams that I had to kind of search for a team to put in that 4th spot.
Sure.
So I didn't go beyond that. And then the next team, I mean, I don't think there's any that are even being considered by the most thorough of bracketologists. Just
right.
Nobody else has beaten Purdue except for Nebraska and Northwestern. Maryland does have the road win at Illinois, but they have a bunch of losses. Iowa, Indiana, nowhere near. Minnesota has a really poor non-conference. I mean, something's got to happen for another team to make themselves into that conversation, Joe, because there's none right now. I mean, I'll take a look at the bracket matrix real quick. Yeah, there's not a single Big Ten team in the other at-larges category, even with the likes of Kansas State, Villanova, Xavier, Gonzaga. I mean, there's no team even being considered at the point. So I don't have an answer for you because I don't think there is one.
Well, certainly not the news a lot of, probably 8 of our 14 fan bases want to hear, but certainly we're not going to BS or blow smoke up the butt on this show. So, yeah, Sean, I think this Saturday is going to be very important, especially for Michigan State. Nebraska, I hope it's not important for their sake because the only way it would be is if they drop this game. And then from there, Wisconsin. We pray to God in an hour or so that they get it together.
So, Joe, that's all we have for them today. Mike and I will be on tomorrow, hopefully, and then we'll be back next week. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you next